All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first public accounts meeting of the new year. It's January 5th, and I'd just like to say Happy New Year to everybody and welcome everybody here. We've got Carla Bernard, Sydney McEwen, Robert Henderson, Corey Deagle, and today is a planning meeting, so I'll just call the meeting to order and I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Sydney? So our first item on our agenda is consideration of our work plan. And so at this point in time, if anybody has ideas that they'd like to put forward for consideration of the committee to add to the work plan. No? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess the only one up from my perspective would be a little bit around the Auditor General's update on the COVID spending. We haven't really, it's not due for a little while yet, but I mean, maybe an update on how they're proceeding with that, so that'd be just.
Okay. So discussion on that. We're just discussing our consideration of the work plan, and the request has been to have an update from the Auditor General on their, sorry, I just saw you look around and just. For an update on the progress of their audit on the COVID spending. So any discussion on that? Do you see that, Robbie, as just being a letter to ask them how they're doing, or have them come in?
I think they should kind of come in and give us a bit of an update, because it's been an issue that, the numbers were pretty high. There's been a lot of debate in the legislature about, the oversights around that spending, and the Auditor General said that they were going to give us a report on that at some point, so maybe if the staff come in and do that. It's the same argument another is around the blue books, like when's that stuff going to be released? So I mean, maybe the Auditor General just come back in and give us a little update on those things and give us the opportunity to ask a few questions regarding those two subjects.
Yep. And I would also add the Auditor General also has the letters that we received from the departments that had missed their reporting requirements in order to be consolidated into the blue books. So we might want to have a conversation around, how they feel about the reasons why those different departments agencies and Crown Corps, etc., weren't able to meet them, because there was discussion around the Auditor General's timelines as well. So that might be another topic that we could ask them to speak to as well. So does anybody have any concerns about requesting the Auditor General to come in to talk about those topics? Sid?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any problem with them coming. I'm just wondering if they're going to have enough information, and I'm trying to recall, I don't know if the clerk has any information. Did he not say that they were just getting going on? Like, do they have enough to give us? Like, should we wait until the spring for an interim report, or like, I'm just trying to recall, when did they say they would have the COVID audit done? And would it be better to do it like at a halfway point? And maybe we are at the halfway point, Robbie, I don't know.
Yeah, I can just say it was supposed to be an 18-month endeavor.
Right.
And so at this point in time, I think we're past that halfway point, because they were asked to do it in the spring. So June, actually prior to that, I think they were asked to do it before the sitting. So, but it was 18 months at that it was supposed to take in order to complete it.
Sounds good.
So, okay. So the decision is that we'll ask the Auditor General to come in to talk about COVID. The letters that we received from the Crown corporations, there was 8 letters, I believe, that we received as to why they had missed the reporting periods. And I guess anything else the Auditor General might want to discuss with us at that point in time too. We'll leave it open and encourage them to bring anything forward if they see fit. Robbie?
Maybe an update on when the blue books will be released.
Okay.
Like I say, I don't think we need a whole lot of details, but just to have them in front of us and ask any particular questions and hear from them how their schedule's going to, and give us a timeline on when they will be releasing some of these pieces of information.
Yeah. Can you correct, I'm wondering, is it the Department of Finance that releases the blue books? It's not the Auditor General, right?
That's probably true.
It's the Department of Finance. So that timeline's coming up on January 31st. We could send a letter out to the Department of Finance to find out if they're still on track. I don't know. It's just, would that be,
Well, everything seems to be delayed because of COVID. I guess that's the point. And so it's somewhat harder for us to do our job as members of public accounts when you're never sure when these dates of things are going to be, the target's going to be met. And I get it's a great excuse, and it's great to hear that, whatever that argument is to why things might be delayed. Just helps us a little bit more, that's all.
so your ask is to find out if they're still on track for January 31st?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any concerns or discussion that they'd like to have around that? Sid?
I think it's ridiculous to invite them in when it's January now, to ask them if they're still on par for January 31st.
I think I'll agree with the minister's situation. The other Auditor General, maybe not so much, so I think they should be here. But the minister, if it's January 31st, that's their deadline. Yeah, the time to
Okay.
get them would be January 31st, so.
Yeah. Okay, so are we okay with when we ask the Auditor General if they come in, if they have any update that they would like to provide us on the blue books at that time, then they can do so? Okay, great. So that, the final decision is to have them come in. And I also would add that it is possible that they've got an interim report now that they can report multiple times. So if they do have any performance audits, or maybe even the financial audit that they might have completed that they are planning on releasing in time, we probably should find that out too, for the Auditor General, because they can report more than once now. So we'll also, is everybody okay if we ask if they have anything else that they would like to present to us at that time, if there is any interim reports that they might have? Okay. All right, so that is kind of the first thing to add, is to have the Auditor General come in. Any other items that we'd like to add? Carla?
I'd like to see someone come in to talk to us a little bit about the carbon tax. And the language in the act saying that it's to be revenue neutral. So just to kind of get them to come in to see what the plan is and the time frame to be reported on, and see if there's anything to update us on.
Okay. And I believe that that's also an Auditor General action too that they're working on, if I'm correct in that. So am I correct in saying that the Auditor General has it's a statutory obligation, I believe, to review the Climate Leadership Act and how that the carbon tax money is spent, and whether it's spent in ways that are deemed correct, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I believe you're right that he has an obligation under that act. I'm not sure of the exact details of it. You could be, you might have just described it properly. I'm not certain of that.
Okay. So would you be okay if we ask the Auditor General that at the same time as they come in, if they can provide an update around that audit at the same time? Would anybody have an issue with that? Are we?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we'll add that to the list of things for discussion with the Auditor General. Thank you. Carla, do you have any other items?
If somebody else wants to go, I'm just looking through here to see.
So I'll add one while you're looking, Carla, if that's okay. Just wanted to throw out to the committee to get your thoughts on the Information and Privacy Commissioner, and a couple of items around that. I'm not sure if anybody's experienced any responses from FOIP requests, but I do believe that there is a delay in getting responses back from FOIP requests. when you look at the decisions online since the new appointment, I think there's only been one decision that has been completed and made public. So there seems to be a higher volume of FOIP requests that have been coming in. We heard that through the Government Record Retention Special Committee. And so a couple concerns around that would be, is the commissioner overwhelmed with requests? Or is there a lag in responses? And is there anything that we need to know about what's happening there? But also with the APSO office and whether there's a challenge for them to be responding to FOIP requests in a timely manner. And so I just kind of wanted to put out, I'm not sure if it would fall under this committee, but I do think that there's a public, not transparency, but there is an obligation there for the public body to respond to those types of requests. And I've heard a couple of times that those are pretty lengthy. And now we've got a large report from IRAC that has been now brought into that office. They only really have 2 staff members in that office. So I'm just concerned about their resourcing and whether they're able to keep up with the volumes. So I just wanted to put that out to the committee for discussion around us as we're oversight, and it is an independent office, but FOIP requests also fall under justice, so it is possible that it would go under the Health and Social Development Committee. So I just wanted to have some conversation on that and the concern that that office is overwhelmed at this point in time. So maybe have the commissioner come in to talk to us, and have the APSO office to discuss the length of time that it takes for them to respond. Any thoughts on that? Sid?
It sounds like a good idea. My first reaction was why this committee for sure, but
I don't know where
I
it
don't know
sits, yeah.
why we would do it here. But
And, well, and possibly it's not said, and maybe it's a letter to the Health and Social Development Committee and maybe it hasn't been brought up in that committee, but I don't say, I know I could just put that out personally as a member for them, but I do think that overall it is a concern that I think that there's a heavy volume there and that it's something that we probably all should be concerned about. Sid?
thank you. I don't disagree. I don't know if it's our job as public council to be sending letters to other committees to tell them what to do.
Okay.
As a private member, if it was a concern for me, I could absolutely ask another committee to look into something. But also, you're very free to bring it up and have this committee vote to determine whether to bring them in or not.
Yeah. Okay, Rob?
I guess I kind of go along with Sid. I mean, we're public accounts. I get that a lot of things can kind of fall under our peruse, but let other committees make their decisions on what they think is their priorities, and if they feel it's a high enough priority in that committee, then by all means, and it's easy for us to support that. But I know as a committee member here, I'm going to focus on just what I have to do.
Yeah.
So we've got a big agenda.
Well, I think we got a weighty agenda in the respect that public accounts has a lot of, and I find it's a lot of stuff. Not that I read it all by any means, but to digest all this stuff. So to reach out too far into what our mandate is, it would be. I'm not as excited about that. I guess is the best way to put it. I'll go along, but I'm excited.
Okay. Any other thoughts from any other members? Carla?
I kind of agree in terms of, the more I think about it, where it falls. But I wouldn't mind as public accounts. I'm trying to work through this to see which would be better if it came from a private member or public accounts. But as a public accounts committee member, I don't mind sharing that concern with another committee and I don't know the wording, but suggest or ask or whatever that they added to their work plan.
Or just flag it? Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? So if it comes down to, it doesn't sound like doing it in this committee is bubbling up to the top. How does the committee feel between suggesting it as a topic for another committee, or is the thought that a private member should just do that? Robbie?
For mine, that to me, that would be a private member. If you have that concern, which you're bringing to this committee, we're saying that might have some worthiness to it, so take it to that other committee and a committee member on that committee to bring it up and see if they agree with that. So
Okay.
that would be generally my thinking on the subject anyway. Keep to our mandate as best we can and as close as we can, and let other committees make their decisions on their own merits.
Okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Okay. So I will take that as private member. Carla?
I would love to have I don't know, perhaps Deputy Minister from Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy to talk about the Public Works Act and the Roads Act. There's a requirement for them to table an annual report, and there hasn't been one tabled since 2016-17. And the information is supposed to be provided to Cabinet, so the information is there. I'm just not sure why it's not tabled and made public, so a transparency issue there. And with all the money that has been spent on roads, I think that that's information that should be readily available to the public. So I would suggest that.
Okay, so have the Deputy Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure and Energy come in to talk to, I guess, first why the annual reports are so delayed and where has their spending been going, and a breakdown. Because that report, I guess, would break down districts, or maybe not districts, but counties and stuff like that, and provide more detailed information. Okay, Corey?
Do you just want to know where the reports are, Carla, or like could we write them a letter and say, why haven't you tabled the report?
It could be a letter if that's what we think. I think that this is.
And if we're not satisfactory, then
I think
Satisfied.
personally, I'd rather have them come in with that chunk of money that's been spent. And under the Public Works Acts for buildings too, so it's not just the pavement, but buildings too. Just, it would be nice to just hear what they have to say. I would love to see them come in, but up to the committee, what everybody thinks.
Thoughts from the committee?
I don't have a problem if they come in.
Okay. Sydney?
Yeah, I guess it's okay. Just to your point about what roads are paved, it's just a shout out to the current minister. They brought in the map that shows exactly what was paid every section of any road in Prince Edward Island. The map, it's
Right.
awesome. So I encourage everybody to go look at it.
Yeah, and that's fair, Sid, but I don't think that negates their obligation in the
I
legislation.
didn't say that.
No, I know. Yeah, I know.
there's a lot on it.
But, so we're
I think there's
okay?
a number of areas that, are lacking in the annual reports, and I've heard a number of ministers say, like, okay, now we've got to get those out, and it's probably easier for the current ministers to do well, I guess we couldn't do it this current year, you'd have to go back, to the previous year, but,
Okay.
I probably would have sent a letter first, but if you want them in, I would vote in favor of that.
Okay.
Is there a
Corey?
number of departments that don't have their annual reports?
There is, I mean, we've addressed a number of them in this committee, and then, yeah, Ryan can speak to that.
Committee members,
Because that's part of the research we got him to do, right, so.
I just so happen to have provided you with research on your report tabling. It's in front of you. Yes, there are a number of departments that aren't really up to date on annual reports, and then there are also a number of agencies and corporations that are listed under the Financial Administration Act that are supposed to have annual reports in, and some do, some don't. There's a table in the document I provided.
Wow. Corey?
I'm wondering if, instead of just singling out that one department, do we want to send a letter to all departments that don't have their, and see the responses we get back? Or did we do that? I don't.
So we sent out a letter about the consolidated financials and why they had missed their reporting dates. We didn't send this out, though. That's a lot of departments that are behind in annual reports. And we all know, I mean, data is as good as, is only accurate if it's current, right? And that's what the annual reports are for. So thank you, Ryan, for pulling this together. So, Sydney?
I guess, Carla, would it be your intention to bring all of them in, or are you just actually only interested in transportation, infrastructure, and energy?
I'd love to hear from all of them, but I don't think that's realistic. Well, seeing this list, I mean, I'd have to go through and see what, I don't know, that's a good question. But I don't know. I'm
Well-
curious to hear
Like, a
everyone
lot of them are
else's
Crown
thoughts.
Corps, right?
Yeah.
I guess not.
And some of them we've addressed, right? So we've addressed this, the Housing Corporation, for sure. But, I mean, we've got a lot on this list that have not submitted. And this is, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a legislative obligation for them, it's a statutory requirement for them to report on an annual basis, correct?
It's a little bit complicated, and I don't want to provide a legal opinion
Yeah.
on it, but my understanding in the Financial Administration Act is that it's reporting entities that, under that act, have to report annually, and that's the agencies and commissions that are found in the schedules of the act. The act specifically says that departments are not reporting entities. So I didn't see a requirement under the Financial Administration Act for departments to provide an annual report. But then if you look at Treasury Board policy, there is a Treasury Board policy that says departments should be publishing an annual report.
Okay,
That's all explained at the outset of this document.
okay. So thoughts on this? There's a long list. So,
Well, the original motion was for, to bring in the Deputy Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Energy on 2 specific annual reports.
Yeah,
I think it's under the same, so it's the Public Works Act and Transportation, or sorry, Roads Act, but I think that that's all consolidated under Transportation, Infrastructure, and Energy, is how the last report that I saw. And I think what flagged there is a written question that's been submitted that hasn't been responded to, and we're both familiar with a FOIP request that's gone in that's not been responded to. So that's part of the concern around that one, is when the information's been requested, but the information's not being provided, to bring the deputy minister in to speak to that, because that's, go ahead, Sid.
When was the written question submitted?
I'd have to go back and look at the legislated, but I
Just like
believe,
approximate, like was it this fall session? or
not
was
this
it-
fall session, I believe it was the fall session prior to that.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
Okay,
So I would vote in favor of this motion.
okay, thank you. Everybody else okay with bringing in transportation? Okay. And so what I'll ask then is like a secondary request based on go ahead, Corey.
So we're bringing in transportation because they didn't respond to a written question.
Well, no, because a member of the committee requested that specifically happen, and, but, I mean, this obviously leads us to another question as to what do we do with the rest of them, right?
Yeah, we're not supposed to be partisan, so we're singling out one department to take them in.
Well, I don't think responding to FOIP requests or to written questions that have been
It's not
submitted through the
our committee's
legislature.
job to ensure what FOIP requests are responded to. So who put the FOIP request in?
Well, it was a member of the public that has
So it's our
notified.
job to make sure a member of the public's FOIP request is.
Well, it adds to why.
I understand why they're
Excuse
taking
me, but I'm
transportation.
chair member, and if you have something to say, then you can wait till I call on you. Corey?
So I understand why we want transportation. It fits your narrative of our government paving. And we said this committee wasn't going to be used for partisan reasons. So I'm saying there's a number of departments that haven't submitted their reports. Why are we singling out one department?
So that's a fair statement, but there was a motion on the floor in order to call that department, and this is new information that has just been brought forward to the committee. So now we can open this discussion up to how do we want to handle the rest of the departments and crown corporations that are listed on this list. So if you have a suggestion, how would you like to move forward with them?
I don't think I'm in the majority here, but I think write each of them a letter. Ask them for an
Okay.
update. If we're not satisfied, if transportation comes back and says, basically, or doesn't even respond, or just says, no, it's not a concern of ours, and we haul them in. But I just don't see why we're singling one out.
Carla?
I would agree with that. I think that sending letters to all of the different entities who haven't submitted their reports. And I also think that, you know, I would be really curious to see if there's any other departments who are not responding to FOIP requests, because that's a real problem. I mean, these should be already public. Doesn't matter what it falls under, what department it falls under. If something's supposed to be made available publicly, and if Cabinet has that information, and no one's responding to FOIP requests, I just think that that's a real huge problem with transparency. And so I agree, we send a letter, and I don't know how, I mean, it's not our job to, as the member mentioned, it's not our job to oversee FOIP requests and ensure that they're being done. However, as public accounts, we're here to ensure transparency, and so I feel like there is an obligation there if we do know that there's someone that information that should be easily available at someone's fingertips is not there, and certain members or certain people have that information, but it's not shared. I just think that that's a huge problem, and take out the department. It doesn't matter what department that falls under.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Sydney?
Thank you, Chair. Just clarification, you're saying that the department is ignoring FOIP requests, and I very much doubt that's happening. I think perhaps you mean written a request. If someone's not getting back to someone personally in a written request, that's different, but the department would be answering to the FOIP, the commissioner, like they have to do that. So I just like to correct the record. I doubt very much that the department is not answering a FOIP request, because they absolutely have to. And there's no, I've been frustrated by written questions before too, but there's no timeline on when they respond to that. I wish they would respond quicker. If this has been a year, for sure. But I just wanted to clarify about when you say, but they're not answering a FOIP request.
Carla?
How long does one have to wait for a FOIP? Is there a time?
There is a set time, Sydney. Did you want to, oh, sorry, your microphone was on, so I just, well, and I'll be honest, this is why I brought up the FOIP request issue, and whether we look at this as something under this committee or if another committee looks at it, and to call in APSO and to call in the commissioner, the Privacy and Information Commissioner, to see if there is a problem in multiple departments, because there was notification that there is a problem in one specific FOIP request. Is it an overarching problem, which is why I was asking to review it, but that is something that I'll submit to that particular standing committee. So I'm not sure we can answer that question, Carla, as to how many departments are doing it, but if we aren't actually bringing in the people that are responsible for FOIP requests and responding from the public body to those FOIP request asks from the Information and Privacy Commissioner office, I don't think we can answer that question. So, Corey?
I won't die on this hill. If we want to have transportation in, that's fine. I'll go along.
Okay. And so are we in agreement that that transportation, I'll ask for a vote. Are we in agreement that we'll call transportation in, tabling discussion on the rest of the annual reports, given that Carla specifically named that one department? Sid?
Yes, but just to go back to Carla for 1 second, now that we've had this full discussion, would you be in favor of what Corey suggested, sending letters to them all? Seeing the responses and then saying, you know, we're not happy with that response, and then start calling in individuals rather than just calling in transportation, and then do we kind of set a precedent where we should be calling in each single department? So I'll let you guide this discussion if you would be interested in doing what Corey said, which I'm okay with, but I would still agree to your original motion, but would you prefer just to send letters to everybody and then decide who to bring in, because there could be a number then we may wish to follow up?
Yeah.
Carla?
Now that we have this information at our fingertips, you know, it does point to a bigger issue. I would be happy with sending out letters. Yeah,
Okay,
I think that would be a starting point.
okay. So the new ask is that we start out with writing letters to all the departments. Did we want to put a timeline on that for them to respond to us by?
Sorry, Chair, would the ask be to submit a report, or would the ask be, what are the practices, or kind of why hasn't there been a report submitted, or would it be both?
Well, that would kind of come down to the information that you want. The question that we had submitted when it came down to why did you miss the financial reporting timelines? Because there is timelines associated with submitting an annual report. It's really no different than meeting your financial reporting requirements. We basically broadly asked why. So why have you not met your required reporting timelines? And we left that open for them to give us the example. We didn't ask for specifics. I'm correct in saying that, I think, Ryan? It was just why did you not submit your in line with the Financial Administration Act?
For the statements, yeah, I think it was, why did you not meet the deadline, and what will you be doing to
Right.
change that in the future?
Yeah.
So, Chair, perhaps this one is an ask that they submit a report and don't ask the whys, but to submit. I don't know what a fair timeline is on that. I mean, if they haven't submitted in years, you would think that it shouldn't be too much of an ask. However, I do understand that, you know, life happens and things are busy, so I think we ask for a report.
Okay. Other thoughts, discussion from the committee? In what's, Sydney?
I would include why they're not done and when do they expect it to be done.
Okay. You're okay with that, Carla? Yes?
I can understand there's legitimate delays, maybe not the length of these, but there's legitimate delays when departments change names and they split and you have to get information from separate departments and bring up, so I understand that, but there's some that are too long. So I would ask those two questions and you know, we're coming into a legislative session, so I would respond in the next.
At least prior to the
in the next
legislative
couple-
assembly?
I would say by end of January,
Okay,
because then we might get some of them back during this session.
okay. So the request is why you didn't meet and when will you be completing the reports, and for them to respond by January 31st. All in favor? Okay? Yes.
Ask, just for specifics, in the research and the list you have, there's departments, and then there's all the entities in the Financial Administration Act. Do you want it to go out to all the current departments? Or, I mean, there have been there have been no annual reports for 1920 submitted, as far as I can tell, but a couple of former departments, annual reports were submitted for 1819, as you can see. And then in the second chart, there's a few entities that are essentially up to date on their reports. And then there are some that might not have an annual report for 1920 in, but they do have 1819, for example. I'm just wondering, do you want to blanket to all of them that aren't fully up to date, or all those that have not gotten at least 2018, 2019 in, or what?
Carla?
That's a really good point, Ryan, and I think, in my mind, if they've got their 2018-19 reports in, they're way more advanced than some of the other ones, so perhaps if everybody agrees, we kind of give them a break, and not send them the letters, and just send the ones that haven't been submitted, that didn't submit in 2018-19.
Okay, other thoughts? Okay, so we'll submit it to anybody who it has not gotten, anybody that has up to date up to this current year, so just has not submitted for 1920, but has missed their timelines for the years prior to that. So more than a year out of date. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure, actually.
So if, Ryan, if they've missed years prior to 1920 as well, then we will submit a letter to those.
Okay.
That's what you said, right, Carla?
Okay. Whereas, well, for example, it's a little bit difficult, but for example, like the PEI Management Corporation, Cannabis Management Corporation didn't exist for
Yes.
some of these years. But they did submit an annual report for 2018-19. But, okay, here's another example. The PEI Liquor Control Commission has submitted 2018-19 and 2017-18, but I didn't find one for 2016-17. So would you want the letter to go to them?
No, consecutive years. If they've missed, do you want to say if they've missed more than 2 consecutive years? Would that, I know.
Getting into the weeds a little bit, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that, I understand where you're coming from. To me, it's, the issue is if we look at the PEI Liquor Control Commission, they've submitted, they're kind of up to date now, but they hadn't submitted before, or what was the other one I was looking at, we'll look at that as maybe they've turned over a new leaf and they are kind of making it a priority to get these reports in. So if they've missed, oh, I lost my train. But if they, if they haven't submitted what was it we said, 2018-19 report, then I would, yeah.
I think that, I understand that.
Yeah, okay.
If that's what the committee wants to do.
Okay, everybody's good with that? All right. Okay. So, any other additions? I lost my computer. Anything else to add to that? Or, sorry, any other new topics to add to the work plan? Yeah, are you, okay, Carla?
I got a couple more here. Thinking about Maritime Electric and the $10 million of overbillings and now the raising rates. From a good governance perspective, I kind of considering what IROC's role in ensuring that they're paying money back to islanders. That feels big, and that feels like something that I think that would be an important thing moving forward, to have a solid understanding of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Anybody have thoughts on that? So the $10 million of over, go ahead, Sydney, or sorry, Corey?
Happens often. No, I I don't mind that, I was just, I kind of thought maybe it might be coming up at my committee on Thursday, natural resource, because Maritime Electric falls under. But I don't-
If that's something that you wanted to take to that committee, because Maritime Electric would, I think it's the IRAC and that outstanding $10 million and the oversight of IRAC to ensure that that money goes back, but yeah, for sure, that's where Maritime Electric resides, so there's a good,
I'm expecting it to come up.
okay,
So, would just be my intuition, but.
okay. So, Carl, would you think it would be appropriate to park that first to see if it comes up in that committee
Yeah,
and let that
absolutely.
committee deal with it?
That
Okay.
makes perfect sense.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? Okay. Do you have another one, Carla?
Sorry, I feel like I'm.
No? Okay, if I could put one forward, the Procurement Act, the new Procurement Act that has just been proclaimed, I think there's significant changes that have been made in the regulations piece of that. And I wanted to propose that the department come in and just basically talk about what has changed, how do the regulations work, what's happened, what's changed with the framework. And, that speaks to the tendering process and which I think would fall under us more so than any other department, but I just wanted to put that forward as an idea, given that it's new proclaimed legislation. And it is a lengthy act that it might be good to go through. Any thoughts or discussion on that? Robbie?
Sounds like it'd be enlightening.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments? Are we okay with adding that one to the agenda? Okay. So that is added to the work plan. Okay. A last call for additions to the work plan? Okay. So that was good. The next we will talk about number 4, which is the discussion on committee research needs. And Ryan, I know you have a update on this, so I'll hand this one over to you so you can kind of discuss what options are available to us now. Good?
Yeah, essentially, you may recall back when the CAF were here in November, Sean Murphy mentioned that federally, the committees have 2 analysts assigned to them, and I would say in other jurisdictions, it is common for each public accounts committee to have a designated researcher. Part of my role is as a researcher for this committee and other committees I work for, but my duties are shifting somewhat so that I may be able to do more of that for this committee if you would find that useful and you would want additional research. And so a couple of things that researchers or analysts in other jurisdictions are sometimes tasked with are going through audit reports prior to auditors coming in and meeting with the committee and drafting questions for the committee to pose to the auditors. It's always a case that it's up to the committee members whether to use those questions or not. They're always drafted from a nonpartisan perspective and they're very audit focused. So that's one example of kind of a research task I could provide for you if you want. Another one is to anytime a committee gets an audit implementation plan from a department or other government entity that's been audited by the Auditor General, and they say these are the actions we'll take in response to the recommendations of the Auditor General. The researcher might go through that and pair and examine their proposed actions with what the recommendation was and assess whether, it's an appropriate response, if timelines are involved, if it's actually addressing the problems the Auditor General has identified or any questions for clarification. and then provide that as kind of an assessment, I guess, back to the committee. Those are a couple of areas that researchers often provide work on for their committees. But I could take that approach if the committee would find that valuable, or I'm certainly open to other tasks that the committee might want to give me for specific research on a given topic, or another type of general research. Really, it's however you'd like me to approach the task, essentially.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan. Any thoughts or questions from committee members? Rob?
Well, any bit of research and information, I know as a member that sits on this, because like I said, it's a lot of information is always helpful. One thing I responded to Ryan's email, and just one thing I always like when it comes to some of the policy decisions and things that we're making recommendations, are other jurisdictions, what are they doing in something of a similar nature? And I find that, we usually ask that question sometimes, but I mean, it's kind of, to me, almost a foregone conclusion, we're probably going to ask that. So if you can kind of do some of those types of research information for the committee is always helpful. So, if Ryan's looks like he's going to have some available time, let's utilize it. I think he does a very good job on doing these types of pieces of information and research, and it only helps me as a member. So I'm okay with what direction the committee chooses if it's in for getting us more information on research and more questions and things of that nature. Like I said, I'll make my own decisions on whether I want to ask a question or not. And, so to me, it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I for one think it's a great addition to this committee, and I do recognize that, talking to other public accounts committees through different meetings, that that assistance is extremely valuable to the committee and the work of the committee. And so thank you, Ryan, for making yourself available to us to do that. I appreciate it. And I did want to ask a question. So when it comes to research topics or any other items like that, so for instance, with the work plan that we have put forward, is there also an opportunity for preliminary research on some of those topics if required, if the committee finds needs that help as well? Would that be something that you'd be available to do?
Oh yes, definitely.
Okay.
Any topic really within the committee's mandate that it wants more information on, you can task me with researching that and providing something back to you.
Okay.
Like that annual reports document. Essentially, all I need is some kind of a request from the committee that, to frame what you're looking for. If it's best if it's not just a general do research on whatever.
No, exactly.
If it's a specific topic that you want to know about, the more framed and all the particulars you can provide, the better. It could be something where anytime the committee is looking at a new topic, for example, you might also consider, do we want research on that before we have witnesses in, or before we send correspondence or anything like that.
Okay. And when you were talking about the second component of looking at the audit process and whether the recommendations were fulfilled, are you talking from the perspective of what the department has done to fulfill the recommendations? Is that the connection there, or were you looking at what the AG office has completed as their audit plan and how the recommendation connects? Can you just elaborate a little bit on the second piece for me and who the parties are that you would be looking at?
It would be more anytime the committee gets an action plan from a department that has been audited.
Yeah.
That action plan will say, we propose to do these actions in response to these recommendations. And to look at that action plan and say, and examine, are there timelines associated with the proposed actions? Do they address what the recommendation says should be changed?
Okay.
Any other consideration of them? Are enough details provided? things like that. Not looking at the Auditor General's work, I would
That's good.
propose to do that.
Okay, perfect. I'm great. This is great. Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts on that piece, or we'll move on to the next section? So review of correspondence. Ryan, can you take us through the correspondence, if you don't
Sure.
mind?
So you have a memorandum in front of you. The first piece of correspondence is a letter from David Keedwell, Deputy Minister of Social Development and Housing, providing follow-up information subsequent to his appearance before the committee about the seniors housing program audit. The committee had made some requests for additional information, and that's what he's provided in this letter. And then the rest of the document are financial statements for the Liquor Control Commission and the Cannabis Management Corporation. The committee has representatives of both those groups coming in next week, but in advance of that meeting, the committee wanted audited or draft financial statements from the corporation and the commission, so they've provided them in advance. Just to mention, the 2018-19 statements for cannabis management are audited. Then they've provided draft 1920 statements for the corporation. And then the Liquor Control Commission has provided draft statements for fiscal year 1920, whereas their 2018-19 statements were actually published in the public accounts.
Thank you, Ryan.
No problem.
Can I just ask, in the first memorandum, the release date of the report for 2017-2018 was supposed to be December 31st, 2020. I didn't see that. Did you see that tabled in the legislature?
I don't believe so. If it was by that point, it should appear in that list of annual reports that I provided.
And it's not.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the most recent one for the Housing Corporation that I see is for fiscal year 2016-2017, which was tabled in December of 2019.
So they're already approximately a week late then in meeting what they said they were going to meet on November 30th. So what, how does the committee want to proceed on this one, on the Housing Corporation one? I mean, I'll single this department out because they told us that when they were in to talk about seniors housing, that it would be any day, and we had asked if they would have it in prior to the legislative sitting or during the legislative sitting, and then they responded with this, that they'd have it in by December 31st, and now we're January 5th and we still don't have it. So, again, this is another delay in what they have told this committee that they were going to accomplish, and they have not met this timeline. I personally find it frustrating when we're told something several times, and each time that they've committed to a timeline, that they've missed that timeline. Well, I mean, this is two committees that have already brought them in. They were in for social development, or health and social development, and they were already into us. I'm happy to bring them in if that would be how we want to resolve it. But, I mean, this was a letter that was dated November 30th, that they were going to submit the annual report on December 31st, and they've missed their own timelines for the second time, as far as I'm concerned, in the last 3 months. So would that be our action, is to bring them in to speak to that, or Sydney?
When they say submit by December 31st, but don't they have to table that?
Yeah, but they can table it, they can do an intercession tabling of the document.
So it's just you would
So-
release it publicly on the website and then we would do it officially in the House?
No, well, if it's, how does that work if it's tabled an intercession tabling, it doesn't have to be officially done in the House? Is that right?
Yeah. Command documents that are documents that have to be tabled by law can be intercessionally tabled, and then they're sent out by the office of the clerk. And then at the start of the next session, a list of all the intercessionally tabled documents is read in the House. There is a part in the Financial Administration Act that says that the minister must lay the report before the Legislative Assembly within 15 sitting days after it is received, or within 15 sitting days after the commencement of the next ensuing session, but also make the report available to the general public as soon as possible, but within 6 months of the end of the financial year, whether or not the document has been laid before the Legislative Assembly.
So it is, I guess, conceivable that it is with the minister right now because he's got 15 days to table it, or whoever, yeah, it's a him. I had to think of the department there, and the minister. So he would have 15 days to table it after being in receipt of the annual report. So if they did submit it on December 31st, foreseeably, we won't, it could be until the 15th. Okay. So okay. What's that?
We'll check back in.
We will check back in and possibly discuss it at our next meeting if we'll table it until then. So, okay, I'm okay with that, if everybody else is okay with that. All right, any other correspondence that any member has received that has not been provided yet? No? Okay. The next topic would be number 6. It is review of scheduling. So if my count is correct, we have 5 weeks prior to the next sitting. We have that week before the sitting in which we will not hold a session, a meeting, and then we go into the next session. So we do have 5 weeks. This is one of them. Tomorrow or next week will be the Liquor Commission and Cannabis Corp. So that it will be down to 3. Is there, of the list that we just provided to Ryan, is there any that we'd want to prioritize to ensure that we get it within that 3-week period? A briefing on it. Rob?
I propose the Auditor General's update.
The Auditor General? Yeah. Everybody okay with prioritizing that one? Okay. Is there another one that we'd like to see prioritized? Carla?
The Procurement Act is jumping out at me.
Okay. Would everybody be okay if we prioritize that one, if we can get them in within those 3 weeks? Okay. Any other topics? Carla?
Maybe the carbon tax?
I think that would be combined in with the Auditor General meeting, yeah.
Okay. sorry.
Okay. And we do have other, I think, do we have 1 or 2 others that you were trying to schedule on the list still, Ryan, or have we cleared out?
The only
cleared out?
thing pre-existing this meeting was the Cannabis Management and Liquor
Okay.
Control Commission.
So I do have a question on the Blue Books. So the Blue Books would be released on the 31st of January, so we could potentially fit them in. During our training, I wanted to go back into Hansard to find the piece of that. I do believe that they had said that it was beneficial for us to have the Auditor General's audit on that as well when we review the Blue Books. I might be completely wrong in that, but I feel like that was a statement that was made. Does anybody have any feelings or thoughts around that, if we'd want to wait for the Auditor General to submit their annual report on March 31st before we review the Blue Books, or go ahead and try to fit the Blue Books in prior to the sitting?
Just a
Carla?
question, I'm trying to remember, would that cut down, not cut down, but would that eliminate the Auditor General having to come in twice, doing it that way?
So typically, the Auditor General would come to talk about their annual report, and we would do it over a number of meetings that would require them to cover off their entire, the report, cover off the total report. And that audited financial piece is part of their report, so they would report to us within that annual report. So it wouldn't, I don't think it would cut down in a meeting. It might shorten that meeting, but probably wouldn't cut down. And I think we'd still want to hear from the Auditor General to hear their side of, and not just rest on our own research. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. So if the blue books are submitted on January 31st, as they're scheduled to, we have 2 weeks, I think, prior to the 16th, but foreseeably, that would be something that we'd want to take a little bit of time to review, right? So if that comes out on the 31st, we would have the 2nd or the 9th would be the meeting dates that would be available to us if we wanted to review those prior to the sitting. I personally would like to at least have a week with the blue book, so the 2nd would be pretty rushed, I think, for, you know, if we wanted to have an advanced review of them. So would everybody be okay with that? That was just my personal feel on it. Carla?
And with that, I mean, would it make sense at that point then to just wait until March to start?
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Because I don't know how long the sitting will go, but if the sitting starts on the 23rd,
These are week breaks.
there's a, yeah. And then March 31st isn't that far away, really, in the whole scheme of things. Does anybody have any thoughts? Sid?
Thank you, Chair. Do we wish to do the audit financial statements or the AG report first? Would you just go through the audit financial statements until it was dispatched and then move on to the AG report?
To me, that almost feels backwards, right? Like, because the Auditor General has gone through the audited financials, and I feel like their audit report is basically a summary of what you see in the blue books. And if we had their summary of what they have seen in the blue books prior to us bringing the comptroller in to review the blue books with us, I feel like that Auditor General's report is almost a supporting document that could help us hone into areas that we might need to look at as a committee. Or if there is things that the Auditor General brings up, then we might want to recall the comptroller if we review with the comptroller first. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know. Why would the rush to get them done by August 31st then, if we just waited until the next March?
Well, and that's the thing, though, Sydney. I think if we could look at other jurisdictions, part of the issue with us is in the Audit Act, the Auditor General would only report once a year. And so that was their timeline, right? So they would report March 31st, but our blue books were submitted either on August 31st or October 31st, depending on it being an election year. And the Auditor General didn't have an opportunity to report sooner, right? Because of that legislative requirement. But now that they do have the opportunity to report more than once a year, I think we heard I recall Darren saying that, or the Auditor General saying that that would probably be one that they would release interim and not wait till the annual report, so that it is released closer to the blue books, which would, me personally, I feel like that would be a really, really valuable document to have in reviewing the blue books. Because their eye would be much keener than my eye. I can completely admit to that. So I think it was just a timing and a
Well, it's their
legislative
books.
thing. What's that?
It's their books.
It's there, yeah, right? So, but I'm open, if we want to do the comptroller first and then the Auditor General's report on it afterwards, I'm open to either. Because that's the way that it had always been done anyway, right?
No, I'm just curious, doesn't matter.
Okay. All right, so I'll, if I can put a motion, or I don't think I can because I'm the chair, but if we want to put a motion on the floor to go one way or the other so we can make a decision on it, then that would be great if somebody would like to put forward a motion. And Sid?
Just discussion, but
Sure.
you're right, there's no sense going into it for one meeting and then all of a sudden having an AG report. So let's defer discussing the audited financial statements until after, the winter sitting of the legislature is done,
Okay.
I think. Rather than coming back on the 9th for one meeting when potentially we'll have an AG report in March.
Okay. Does
So I
everybody
would just
agree?
defer that, our scheduling decision until after the House.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that? Okay. Okay, so we will wait until after the sitting of this House, of the next sitting, the winter sitting, to schedule the comptroller on the Blue Books. And potentially the Auditor General will be out imminently in that timeframe. Okay. Any other discussion around scheduling that I might have missed? No? Anybody else want to bring anything else up? Any new business? Sid?
Just a clarification on earlier on the Department of Transportation and the written question, because I know there was, we're on the record here saying these things, and when the department is doing a good job or something, I don't think we should besmirch them, but I've gone through all the written questions. I can't see a written question about any annual report that's unanswered to transportation, so I think it's unfair for our committee to say that.
Oh, and I don't think it's asking for the annual report, Sid. I think it's asking for a list of roads, like it was more specific than that. Go ahead, Sid.
Thank you, Chair. So the conversation here was about 2 annual reports and about written questions not being done. And I asked about that, and they said, well, I forget which member it was, but they said, oh no, it goes back a year. And actually, there's written questions on the 2nd and 3rd day this past House session on specific roads that were paved. So it's now a month. So I get it, there was a holiday in there, that kind of thing. So I expect those answers will come back. I also mentioned that stuff is online, but
Okay.
someone did say no, this goes back a year, and I just looked and there's absolutely no written question on the Department of Transportation. So I just want to put it on the record that they're not answering a written question on that.
Okay, I believe it was me, Sid, and I thought it was earlier than that the written question for a breakdown of the roads happened. I apologize for that.
Well, if you find it,
if
let
I
me know,
miss-
but I don't see it there, so.
Okay, no, I will have a look, but I did recall that there was one submitted, and I just it felt longer
There's
than
one on,
that, but,
social development, or in Department of Social Development, but I just wanted to point that out, that there's none to TA.
on the annual report.
Right.
For sure, I know that there's not one specific to the annual report, but I do know that there was one that went in about roads.
Yeah, 2 on December 2nd and 3rd.
Okay, and so that's my fault. I thought it
I
was,
just wanted to clarify, because some departments are doing a good job of getting back to people on written questions.
right, okay. And I do apologize for misspeaking. It felt longer than that, so
It's okay.
my apologies.
No, so don't need to apologize, I
Okay.
just want to clarify.
Great, thank you. Any other new business before we motion to adjourn? Okay, does anybody want to put a motion forward to adjourn? Or Carla? All right, thank you.